Hello, and welcome to episode number 260 of the LSR podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all of the gaming industry. With me, I have Pat Evans, and I have the distinct pleasure of bringing you Eric Ramsey for his, what did you say, Eric? Like maybe twice a year you hop on this thing with us?
Seems like about that. And you always give me these introductions that I just cannot live up to. Yeah, I'm here, happy to be here. But
listen, this is appointment listening for the people out there. So Eric Ramsey joins us here. You are all now smarter for just having heard his voice for just that little bit of time, but can't wait till we get to our final topic today in his annual prediction piece for what the Super Bowl might do from a handle perspective and all of the different ins and outs of all of that. We'll do the state roundup with Pat as we usually do. Interesting stuff going on, and talk some Hawaii. We don't ever talk Hawaii on this podcast. We'll talk some Hawaii on there. What's going on with Robinhood? What about Florida as well? I had a interesting little story that I will talk about with a casino owner that's here in Las Vegas. But let's go ahead and kick things off here, Pat. We talk a lot about Texas. Let's continue to talk a lot about Texas.
Yeah, I think there was kind of some, I don't know if I'd necessarily call it earth-shattering news, but Governor Greg Abbott came out and said he has no problem with legalizing sports betting, which I think is the most, the strongest take he's given so far. And it stands in stark contrast to Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who has, been staunchly against sports betting and won't even let the Senate hear it. And so I think that's an interesting kind of thing to move forward here, is you've got a governor who says, yeah, let's go ahead and do it. It passed the House in 2023, and we'll see if it can do that again this year and see what happens. I mean, we've talked ad nauseum about the money pouring in from the billionaires and such that want to get it done and have destination casino resorts and online sports betting. And now that the governor says he has no objections, does that mean Dan Patrick, lightens up a little bit or not? I guess we're going to just have to wait and see, but it does not slow down. It's just continuing to accelerate down in Texas in terms of this whole sports betting thing.
Eric and I go way back to the online poker days. And Eric, there was someone who was a very outspoken person who had a large bank account that would always throw around some weight when it came to the online poker debate. And now that family is actually in Texas, and here comes the governor going, yeah, man, I'm fine with what's good. Yeah, sure. I'm not opposed to that all of a sudden. Like, I'm sure there's no correlation at all whatsoever with the Adelson family now being in Texas, right?
Can't be. It's funny how we see how the opposition just sort of dissolves once the Adelsons come into the picture in Texas, huh? Yeah, super interesting. It's funny, the cast of characters we have involved in this. It does seem like maybe the opposition is eroding finally. The baseline state for Texas is always pessimism that they're going to be able to do anything. There's just so much opposition. It's so complicated. But we've got all these little precursor conversations happening. The sports teams and the billionaires seem to be on board. People want casinos. People want sports betting. We got it through one chamber last year, which is a big feat by itself. We're in 2023. So seems to me like we might just be turning the corner. I'm cautious to say that, but might be getting there in Texas.
As our resident numbers and predictions guy, Texas, like day one that it legalized, would become the biggest market in the U.S.
I was muted. Yeah, we saw what happened with New York, right? So think about mirroring that. It's sort of, I've been reluctant to put a number on Texas because it kind of depends what we see for an implementation, how limited it is, how many, which operators are able to participate in things like that. But yeah, really no reason to expect it to be anything other than enormous.
Yeah, I would guess. I mean, they like their sports down there in Texas and certainly have every single type of sport that there possibly is. And so I can only imagine it would rocket ship up to the top right there. Pat, we do our little state recaps here each and every week here on the pod. And, we've talked Minnesota, we've talked Mississippi, but a new state entering the little fray here with some Hawaii nuggets as well. So take us around the world here.
Yeah. So Minnesota, I think, is a state we've watched very closely the last couple of years and get, very close to the finish line. Even last year, there was a reported deal at the very end that just ran out of time, which I figured, if we were going to see bills reintroduced this year, we'd see that bill. or that deal. But interestingly enough, Senator Jeremy Miller on the Republican side has introduced one version of a bill, and it is more kind of in tune to what we've seen in the last couple of years that gives the state's tribes exclusivity, which is kind of what the DFL, the Democratic side, wants. And, so that's a kind of a positive in that realm, I think. Matt Klein on the DFL side has introduced a bill too. It's again different, so it is interesting. Again, if there was a deal in place last year, why are we straying from that? Lots of shifting gears, of course, happen every year, and so we'll see what happens. Of course, the Senate's tied, and it'll probably shift back to the DFL control by one vote. So we'll see, what happens there. Really interesting right now, though, is the House is not meeting. The because of kind of politics that have happened, it's tied right now. Again, a special election could give it back to the DFL, but it's tied right now, and the Republicans are kind of assuming control, and the DFL isn't showing up. And so there's a lot. So if the House isn't even meeting, then nothing can get done. So Minnesota is just bonkers and weird. In Hawaii, a sports betting bill did pass through a committee. It also passed through a committee last year, for the first time a bill has gone that step since 2019. There's just a lot of opposition in the heavily democratically controlled legislature there, and that's because of a lot of concerns of problem gambling and how it might prey on the lower income population there. However, it passed through this committee by 9-0. A big chunk of support there, and the governor is even coming out and saying, you know what, this could be a good idea, but we need to make sure we get it right. So does it get done this year? I highly doubt that, but it is, I think, just kind of a move in the right direction. What else is going on? I mean, it's been a huge week. Governor Mike DeWine in Ohio announced he's proposed in his new budget to double the tax rate from 20% to 40%. A reminder, in the last 2-year budget, he doubled it from 10% to 20%. So huge there. Bill in Georgia just got introduced yesterday to legalize sports betting. Again, another state we've been watching very closely the last couple of years and just can't get over the hump.
What about the online mobile effort there in Mississippi?
Well, yeah, that last week it passed a committee. This week it passed the House, which, again, it passed the House last year. So we're going to a place we've been before. The sponsor this year kind of made a few amendments to it, to last year's bill, to kind of appease the Senate, including a ban on credit card funding of accounts, creating a little fund to help, I don't think it'll completely replace any lost income or perceived loss of income from the smaller casinos that don't want to expand because they're worried the bigger casinos are going to partner with FanDuel and DraftKings and just completely dominate, and so they'll lose revenue. So there's a little fund that can help kind of mend that fence, maybe. And then, of course, they also are pitching 2 skins versus 1 skin per casino. So we'll see ultimately what happens there. I don't know if those are enough to make the Senate say, hey, well, this is okay. But a lot of ground that we've seen before is it did pass the House and is now back in the Senate, and we'll see if they want to get it done.
The days of us talking about Mississippi Mobile when you had to be like on property. Eric, do you remember like having to explain to people where it was like, no, you could be in the parking garage? And
they had to clarify whether the parking garages were included in casino property.
It was so funny listening to that. But again, have not been able to get it over the finish line. Of course, their neighbor in Louisiana has for a while now. So got to imagine the Tide's got to be trying to get them there in that one. Eric, we've talked an interesting amount here over the beginning of the year, end of the year, beginning of the year about Robinhood, just because it's just a name we didn't really talk about at all in all of this. And then they kind of got involved in the space, but maybe that is at least going to be on pause for a bit.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly where you guys left off this conversation, but you remember last month, Crypto.com and Kalshi both started offering what amounts to Super Bowl futures. Essentially, it's event contracts that are peer-to-peer. Sorry, I have animals fighting behind me. And this week on Monday, Kalshi partnered with Robinhood to basically provide odds for the Robinhood platform, to put it in sportsbook terms. You could be able to trade Kalshi contracts through Robinhood. On Tuesday, the CFTC, which is the regulator of those contracts, asked Robinhood to stop offering those. Robinhood acquiesced and did stop offering them, which is a divergence from one of their competitors, Crypto.com, which got the same sort of lecture and decided they were just going to go ahead and keep doing what they were doing. So a little bit of tension there. Really, this is sort of one more mile marker in trying to figure this all out. We have this new form of sports speculation that is regulated through a different venue and through a different vehicle, and trying to get a grasp on what that really means for their ability to offer markets and the regulated industry as well. So let me go deal with that. I'll let you guys chew on this for a minute and I'll be right back.
That's awesome. I love it. Listen, little animals thrown in every now and then, Pat, that's not a big deal. That's just kind of fun. But look, as long as there are odds, as long as there are laws and regulations, right? There are always going to be people who are dissecting these laws and regulations, and they are going to be trying to find little loopholes, little ways in the back door, little whatever it might be. So as we were kind of like, oh, that's interesting that they're doing this, it's not a surprise that they were doing it.
No, not at all. And I think to your point, the CFTC's talked or come out and said they're going to be holding roundtables, and they want to figure this all out too. They don't want it just kind of going all willy-nilly all over the place. And we're, again, I talked to Senator Joe Adabo up in New York. He's kind of aware of this situation and says it is a little trickier because this is all regulated at a federal level, but he wants to kind of get an idea of how it's working at a state level. And yeah, you're just seeing that in everything. I know, we've got a lot of bills kind of popping up this year in different states about the sweepstakes stuff, which is kind of the same thing you're talking about of operators finding little loopholes to legally offer, sports betting. Same thing with the DFS 2.0, which again, we're seeing bills pop up to regulate it and or eliminate it. So yeah, there's always going to be something, it feels like, around the corner.
Eric, I think the interesting thing to me about Robinhood and Crypto.com mainly is kind of like how it really could open up perhaps sports betting to people who never in a million years would have thought about it. Cause it's kind of like you're sitting there and it's in front of you and you have the opportunity. It's like, okay, your Ethereum, Ethereum went up $300 that day. You've got 3 Ethereum, you're up $900 and you're kind of like, I'll pull 300 out of my Ethereum and just kind of pop it over on this, that, and like the ease of kind of moving money around that isn't necessarily your money in your bank account. It's being able to like, oh, okay, this stock went up, whatever. I'll sell a couple of shares of this and then I'll do this. And so you're not pulling from, your actual money. We always talk about having bankrolls when we talk about gambling or poker or whatever it might be. And it's kind of like, it's just a different thing. It's kind of like it is still your gambling, you call it investment portfolio. I consider stocks and crypto gambling, but whatever. That's a conversation for another day. But you're pulling from something that isn't necessarily like your nest egg. It isn't like the stuff that you're living off of or whatever, where you can kind of fund your gambling.
I mean, anytime we have shared wallet where we can speculate in different ways, I mean, it's not that dissimilar from using your poker funds to play casino games or whatever back in the day. There's, that balance being available creates a lot of opportunities for people who have a notion to gamble on things like that. I think, man, you jogged my brain about something that I wanted to chime in with that, but it just escaped right out the back door. Yeah, no, I think, it's an interesting thought experiment to try to think about, what kind of market penetration these products might have. It's tough for me to see the value for customer acquisition. It's hard. I'm probably not going to go sign up for a Kalshi account to speculate on the Super Bowl. Yeah. I live in a state with legal sports betting. And even if I didn't, there's probably other options that are more comfortable to me. But yeah, to your point, if you're a trader or someone who uses those platforms on a day-to-day basis, it's probably second nature for you to hop over to the other side and have a go at sports.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting to me, just kind of thinking about just back in the day, as you mentioned, like for me, how easy it was to kind of like, okay, I would take money from this, put it in NetTeller, then instantly put it in this other thing and just kind of like whatever. And that money was I never viewed it as my money, right? It was just that money that lived in the gambling ether out there. And it's, kind of maybe the same, like you said, with the person who's a trader or the person who's a daily crypto trader, whatever it might be, that money could be looked at the same way, where it's like, oh, you know what? I'm up a few $100 in ETH today. I'll sell off, a little bit of ETH and I'll put it in this. And, it's just kind of like taking this from here and sticking it over here, even though it's all in the same account. So pretty
and it
interesting.
Really is. I mean, it is a different mindset. Traders are not thinking about this as betting either. They're thinking about it as opening and closing positions and longing and shorting and things like that. So it's just a different beast than we're used to dealing with for the last 7 years here.
Yeah, pretty cool stuff. And we'll see how that all goes down. But again, Robinhood going to at least back off for now. All right, Pat, down in Florida, we know, even though it is currently a monopoly down there from a legal gambling standpoint, they are going to go ahead and they're going to target some of these other guys that might be taking some money out of the state.
Yeah, the Florida Gaming Control Commission, they came out and said, hey, we're going to did send 3 cease and desist letters to Offshore Sportsbooks, BetUS, MyBookie, and Bovada. Not completely surprising, because I think we've just seen this huge wave of regulators saying, hey, get out of the state, at least to Bovada, and Bovada has been listening. So I think that's of note, because I think they'll listen here, and I don't know about the other 2, but I'm sure they will. It came out just in time for the Super Bowl, and there was a release that came out with it, and it was basically like, hey, make sure you're wagering carefully and responsibly and doing it legally. And it did note Hard Rock Bet is the only legal option right now, so make sure you do it there. And we also saw the Arizona regulators come out this week and say similar things. Of course, they have a much more robust market of options there, but kind of the same thing. I think the Super Bowl is a great time to remind people, hey, if you have legal options, use them. Don't go offshore. Don't, you're risking your consumer protections and all that. And that's, I think, kind of what Florida went ahead and did with this.
Yeah, I mean, the timing makes perfect sense. This is obviously when the offshores really start to it's the beginning of the season, and then right around Super Bowls when they really start to kind of flood the advertising and spend the money to try to get in front of new eyeballs and whatnot. Eric, every time one of these C&Ds is sent out, a Western Union branch cries, because like getting the your check from the person who had 9 names, or you sending
your MoneyGram,
MoneyGram to someone who had 14 different names, like in some random whatever. Like like Western Union branch is going like, dude, you're taking away so much business from me, man. Come on, like this is not fun. But yeah, it's God, those days, those were absolutely amazing with all of this. Quick story time for me, and then we'll get to Eric's Super Bowl article. I had Derek Stevens. I do a program over at VSiN, and I had Derek Stevens, owner of the Circa casino downtown, also the D and the Golden Gate down there, and huge sports betting guy. I mean, the whole reason Circa is basically famous is because they went all in on sports betting, right? Built this gigantic sports book, then they built a pool that is basically just a giant sports book as well. All of that up there. Donald Trump came to town a week after he was elected, and basically was doing stopped in Nevada. He was already going to California, so just stopped in Nevada, did like a brief little appearance or something like that, but he did it at Circa. And so Derek got a few minutes with him and put the federal excise tax actually in front of him, right? Was just kind of like basically saying like, hey, look, here's this thing that's been around for a long time. Nobody knows where the money goes. No one knows why it's still there. Like, it was basically formed back in the day to like be able to add an extra charge against like the mob and illegal bookies and stuff like that. Every time when you would arrest them, it was just one more thing you could kind of tack on to them if they didn't pay their tax, whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And all of this. And like, I'm not saying anything that Derek didn't actually say out loud. He actually said it on the show or whatever. So I'm not giving like inside information here. And basically put it in front of Trump, who said like that he would take a look at it, so just something that's kind of interesting, right? That it's this thing that's always existed that we kind of got away from. Eric, I know when we were first doing this podcast, it was something that we talked about a decent amount, that this thing still existed. It was this like, where the hell is the money going? Why is it this arbitrary number? All these different things like that. And we kind of, every now and then the Nevada legislators will kind of like bring it up and say, hey, what are we doing? This is stupid. But no one ever really has like fought the good fight. And I mean, for Derek to be able to get it in front of the sitting president, who obviously is kind of swiping his pen a lot here lately or something, is at least fairly interesting,
This is not a small amount of money here either. I haven't checked on the numbers lately, but we're talking like, $500 million a year in federal excise taxes. What's amusing about that story is that some of the members of Congress have tried to make an effort to get this repealed, including Dina Titus from Nevada. and not had any, not gained any traction. So just the notion that someone like Derek Stevens might might have some pull in the highest levels of our government is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he's like, listen, if I'm going to have 3 minutes with the guy, it's not like you're going to have a deep conversation, right? It's just kind of like, hey, here's something
that's a good use
like,
of time.
Yeah, it's like, hey, here's something that's out there that like nobody even understands why it's like there, so can we do something about it? All right, so Eric does every single year the very best breakdown of the Super Bowl and money that you could possibly find on the internet. Yes, if you've already read this over at LegalSportsReport.com, you're still going to learn something from Eric here as he dug into all of these numbers and whatnot. So, Eric, I'm going to kick it over to you now. If you guys haven't read the article, it will be in the description of this over on the podcast side of things or on the YouTube side of things as well. But wherever you want to kick things off, and we'll go from there.
Well, I'll hit you with some top line numbers to start with. Our forecast has about 1.56 billion in handle expectations this year. That's up from about 1.3 billion last year, so about 15 or 20% up. Obviously, if we sort of think about hold, operators have a chance to win north of $100 million if they can hold something like 6.5%. So a big opportunity to make money and to acquire customers for operators. I think the big story for us, our forecast sort of matches other ones from other analysts and from the American Gaming Association, which came out this week with a little more pessimistic forecast, but we're all in the same ballpark. I think for us, the thing that I'm watching is New York versus Nevada. I think we're probably the only ones expecting New York to overtake Nevada for the lead this year. Even as we've seen the expansion over the last 7 years, Nevada has held on to its crown as the Super Bowl betting king. And I think it's going to change this year. Should be close at the top, but New York is just such a big market and still growing, by significant amounts, something like 23% in the past year. Nevada slipping a little bit. The game moves away from Las Vegas this year to New Orleans, so they're going to lose some uncountable amount of volume from that. Just looks to me like this is the year where we see New York finally pip ahead. So our model has about 183 million for New York, 170 million for Nevada, Illinois and Florida, and New Jersey, probably over 100 million too. And then, I don't know where you want to go from that. I'll tell you, just as a disclaimer, pretty big error bars in the forecast this year. It gets really hard to predict this with the data we have. And also we talked about things like DFS 2.0 and the contract trading that will, it's not clear yet what kind of impact that's going to have, but there's certainly some pull away from the regulated reported options that we have. So all those are little factors I'm toying around with in my head, but that's the that's the gist of it.
Yeah, I'll start out the questioning. Pat can either bring up a topic or he can ask a question. We can do whatever, but I'll start from here. One thing I would like to note that actually hasn't been really reported anywhere, and I guess there's no real report for it. It doesn't really matter to anybody that doesn't live in Nevada, but out of nowhere and kind of without any sort of announcement in the shadows of the world, like you can bet on your computer now on MGM, which has never been a thing. Like you can only bet on apps, like literally since I've been betting here, and they now allow you to bet on desktop on MGM, which is like no small thing because as we know, like, especially from an in-game perspective, like betting on your computer is much, much easier. And for certainly a higher volume bettor, it's much easier to bet on your computer too, than it is on your phone and stuff. So that's at least one interesting thing for me from the Nevada standpoint, that they did this kind of like right before the Super Bowl and didn't really say much about it. But Eric, as you're forecasting all of this, obviously the number ticks up because of, maturity in some of the markets, increased customers, maybe even some legalization somewhere along the way. But how do you factor in from an in-game perspective? Are you guys bullish on that there will be more people betting in game? Do you keep that number kind of flat? Like, how does the in-game scenario play into this?
Yeah, again, things that we don't have great data on it. So we're using, sort of context clues and back channel bits of information to try to cobble it together. It seems like from what we know, in-play betting is something like 20 or 25% of total volume in the States. My sense is that number probably goes down a little bit for the Super Bowl just because of the base of bettors we're talking about participating in Super Bowl betting. So think maybe 20% of Super Bowl handle is in play. Another 25% or so will be in parlays, particularly in states outside of Nevada. And then there's some future bets rolled up in there too that, come in throughout the course of the season. So Again, speaking to what an imprecise science is, it's trying to cobble all those data points together from dating back to September and trying to piece that into sort of one picture here.
How do you take into account like a new state like North Carolina, which will be their first Super Bowl betting, and a state like Louisiana where they're hosting and have betting? And then how much would being able to bet an over-under on how many times Taylor Swift is shown add to the handle? I need those 3 questions answered.
That's really interesting. Probably more, with the Taylor Swift thing, in all honesty, would make some difference to the types of people that would be interested in betting. Maybe not, certainly not a huge difference to the total amount bet, but would change the complexion of the bettors as a category. So that's interesting to think about. The hosting thing is really interesting. I mentioned we had to discount Nevada a little bit as the game moves away from there. We don't have a great feel for what that looks like, either the loss to Nevada or the potential gain to Louisiana this year. I'm hesitant to even put a number on it, but it looks like Nevada was about 10 or 15% too much last year. It was a little too hot by about 10 or 15%. So that's sort of the baseline increase that I have pegged in for Louisiana this year, and sort of the hit that I expect Nevada to see. But a little bit of a guessing game there. And what was the other thing you asked me about? New states.
North Carolina.
Yeah, a lot of the forecast is just going to be rooted in the financials for the year. So the total Super Bowl forecast more or less mirrors the annual output, with some exceptions, Nevada being a big one. But we can get a pretty good sense of what the ceiling for Super Bowl revenue is like in a state like North Carolina just by looking at their history over the past 10 months. What gets interesting is trying to factor in the other little things, the local interest in the game. Are bettors in North Carolina more or less interested in this matchup than they might be in another one? Things like that. And yeah, that's about all I got for that one.
There are, just to kind of put one little added note here, there are on DraftKings currently, there are 33 Taylor Swift themed bets that you can make currently on the game. 33 different ones that you can make that are Taylor Swift themed. So again, it's a thing, it is a thing. She's doing the most popular human in the world, probably. So,
I'll throw out I'll play devil's advocate against myself here as a little bit of a counterpoint. Also somewhat concerned about some potential fatigue this year. I think there's certainly a chance that betting exceeds our expectations, but I think there's this growing little doubt in my mind that maybe we're going to see a little fatigue set in, specifically with the matchup and with Taylor Swift to some extent. We might have caught the peak of this in the matchup for 2023, and we might be struggling a little to live back up to that this time around.
Eric, outside of Nevada, and even in Nevada, I'm sure it's really, really swayed from what it was maybe even 2 or 3 years ago or something like that. But am I way off base to think it's 99.5% online to 0.5% over the counter? And one of the other things I guess too that I have seen even as I've traveled, and since this is kind of a more newbie type thing, people betting on the Super Bowl, even the kiosks and stuff, not actually having to go to a counter and have that pressure on you of talking to another human being that might look at you funny because you say it wrong or you do it wrong or something. Is there any data out there to that?
We do know that well over 95% of the bets in this year's Super Bowl will be online. New York will be over 99%. Some of the markets are way up there, close to 100%. So yeah, vast majority of betting online. This is also why I'm a little dubious. Your BetMGM desktop betting tidbit is well taken, but I'm a little skeptical that that's really going to move the needle. It's probably only a few percent of the total betting that would be done, remotely on a desktop computer specifically. But yeah, it's what was the last part of your question again? God, I'm struggling today.
No, I was saying, and even I don't think states break this out, but even just like kiosk bets, right? Because there's, everywhere you go now, if they take over the counter, they pretty much have kiosks, a couple on each side or whatever, strategically placed throughout the casino, which does take at least one more layer off of that barrier to entry, which is someone having to talk to someone else face to face.
Yeah. Also speaks to why the Super Bowl is such a good opportunity. It's such a prime spot for customer acquisition, because it's things that people want to bet on, and they can do it with, without much exposure, without much risk, without having to go to a sports book. Yeah.
Pat, you got anything else?
No, I'm pretty good. I talk to Eric all the time, so I'm Eric'd out. Talk about fatigue.
Oh, you have Eric fatigue? I mean,
no,
come on.
I think I'll throw out one more little nugget that I'm watching. Florida's really interesting. We have no data for Florida at all. They've only had legal sports betting for about a year, and we just don't know what that market looks like. So makes obviously for a really tough Super Bowl forecast. My sense is that they're a top 5 market and will be a top 5 Super Bowl market, but really a pretty big shot in the dark there for Hard Rock Bet in Florida.
Will we have any actually, I lied, so I have one more. Will we have any projections when this is all said and done on what the DFS 2.0 operators did in states like California and Texas and the other states that don't have any form of legalized gambling?
Only indirectly. We're going to get totals for the month, but it's going to be up to us to try to figure out, how much of that was Super Bowl related specifically.
Right. I'm sure we can assume a decent amount, but decent amount, but I got you on that one for sure. Guys, the article, like we said, awesome breakdown over there. Go into legalsportsreport.com. You go down to the bottom of the description here in the podcast, or if you're on the video side, it'll be in the description as well. Read for yourself. Tons of work that Eric puts in over there. Awesome stuff. And the other thing you can always like about an Eric article, it comes with graphs or pictures of some sort. Like anything visual, like visual, he's got you. Like if you're a visual learner, he's got you in that. So it's always something that's awesome about that. Guys, reminder, everything we do absolutely free. So please go in, subscribe, rate, review on the audio side. If you're on the video side, hit that subscribe button. We do appreciate all the support from you guys out there in the industry. It's cool to run into people who say, man, I appreciate you guys hopping on, once a week and just kind of keeping me informed of what's going on in the industry, because I know there's a lot of stuff going on that I don't get to hear about. So thanks for all the support. Then all you got to do is just click a button just to say thanks. That's all we're asking from you guys. Eric, appreciate the time, my man. As always, we'll have you on again a year from now, I guess. Unless you want to swing back around, anytime between now and then. For Pat, I am Matt. Talk to you guys next week.